Hello and welcome to the Motor Racing Passion Podcast, brought to you by Breakthrough Health and Wellness. I'm Luke Blattman, joined as usual by Daniel Blattman, Adam Blattman and Brock Schaefer, and today we're looking back on the 2005 Formula One season. It was an interesting season's racing, with the first non-Michael Schumacher world champion of the 21st century, Fernando Alonso. We'll start though with my biggest question from 2005. Daniel, would you have pitted Kimi Räikkönen to replace his front tyre before the final lap of the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring?
Tough one. Hindsight is obviously yes, but who pits someone from the lead when you're behind and chasing the world championship? So, yeah, I think I would have erred on the side of risk and kept him out.
Brock?
Well, it's 2005 and a McLaren, so I think the main point is it doesn't matter, because the car would have broken down before the finish line anyway.
It was the last lap.
But it would have broken down anyway.
Well, I think it isn't something like that was his fifth consecutive year that he failed to finish at Nürburgring. I think something like that for old Kimi.
Geez, that's a stat.
We'll have to fact check that one.
I am now. Yeah, saying that was his fifth year in a row that he failed to finish. Yeah, no, I think if you're in the lead, you chance your arm, especially when you're behind in the F1 championship, world championship. So, yeah, no, like I think if he pitted, he would have come out, third, fourth, I think?
Third.
Yeah.
He needed to win though.
Yeah.
That's where, I think that's where the pressure came from. If he was leading the world championship where he had a buffer, 100% they would have pitted, but he was, chasing the season by that point.
Ron Dennis was pretty unapologetic for not pitting. He was just saying we needed the win. Second place was no good.
Hard to argue with the big man.
Do you remember the commentary at the time? How leading up to that, James Allen, or the ITV commentary that we got here in Australia, James Allen kept on saying that, they should pit. And Martin Brundle was saying, nah, if you're leading the Grand Prix, you got to try and win it. And then when the tyre blew, and as Räikkönen sliding into the gravel trap, I'm pretty sure I remember James Allen sort of going, I told you so.
Yeah, hindsight's always 20/20, isn't it?
But that sort of summed up Räikkönen's year, really. He was giving chase, but the McLaren were behind right from the start of the year.
In a big way too. Renault won the first 4 races. Fernando won 3 of the 4. So yeah, regardless of what McLaren were doing, they were a long way behind.
Because they had the best car and everything as well. They seemed to, in terms of the fastest car. They seemed to have the fastest car, but obviously not the most reliable, as Brock alluded to.
But looking at that start of the season too, they definitely didn't have the fastest car in that first quarter of the season. Or I'd say actually up to Spain. So Australia, Malaysia, Bahrain and Imola, their best result was a third. And in Australia, they finished 8th and 6th. So I think they did have the potential.
Poor qualifying hurt them too a bit, didn't they?
Yeah, but just looking at the speed of that, for Räikkönen to go 8th, 9th for the first 2 races, they hadn't really unlocked the potential of the car by that stage.
Well, I think Australia, Räikkönen had the car stalled or something on the start, so I had to go for an abort start, and he started from the pit lane. And then Malaysia, I'm pretty sure he had a tyre failure and still got back up into the points. So I think the car was there, it just wasn't reliable, whereas later in the year they seemed to get it a bit more reliable to a point where it could actually show its pace. But McLaren always seemed to run heavy on fuel. So if they'd qualify second, they'd have 10 more laps fuel than whoever was on pole. So I think if it wasn't for that sort of odd fueling qualifying rule in 2005, I think the McLaren would have seemed a lot quicker.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. So with the amount of engine penalties that, even regardless of where they qualified, they were starting, 10 positions back in the races. They were always charging through. So, yeah, not a bad shout there, Brock.
Yeah, he got particularly Monza, I think, was critical in the championship when he got the penalty and had to start back in the field for that one. And he had a pretty messy race as well, spinning at one of the chicanes and
Because when you look at it, he only retired from 2 races, and obviously one of them being Germany that you mentioned before. So most of their unreliability came from practice and qualifying, like the Mercedes engine blow-ups.
And they had lots of drive shaft failures. I remember that. It was Montoya or Raikkonen, one of them would constantly have drive shaft failures in practice and in the races. Maybe the majority of them were Montoya, if Raikkonen only got 2 DNFs.
I think Raikkonen won, he was leading San Marino, and he had a drive shaft failure.
Yes, he was leading.
But what a race that turned into.
Well, yeah, that was, if you weren't impressed enough by Alonso's start to the year before then, I mean, that set the tone for the year.
And a nice duel that was followed up 12 months later. So, yeah, Schumacher and Alonso definitely had the wood on every one of those 2 tracks at Imola 2 years in a row.
But how good was it to see the Imola with the chicane in the final part? Like the new revamp one that we've got now is the long front straights, different, but how good was it seeing going back into that final little chicane before the run down to the first chicane there?
Do you reckon that offers anything though? Like it wasn't really a passing opportunity. Like at least I feel now with the revamped part, at least you can get a run on someone into Tamburello chicane.
Oh, I guess only with DRS.
Yeah,
but
that chicane didn't really offer much racing wise, did it?
Maybe not for F1, but for other international series that race there, I think it added a little bit there, especially for the bikes. But
they still use the chicane for the bikes. But I think that last chicane, probably all it ever offered was Damon Hill running into Shinji Nakano in 1997. That's the biggest memory I have of that chicane. Or I think Alan Prost spun there in '89. But no, I don't mind that. I don't mind that long run down to the first corner. But no, Alonso's championship run, I mean, even if the McLarens were reliable, he'd have still been hard to beat, I think, just because he just put together such a strong season.
Yeah, and only one error, really, for the whole season, one driving error from Alonso. So he was sublime, and it was a real sort of like that generational change that you get every, 5-10 years, where the changing of the guard. And Schumacher just couldn't do anything about it, which was interesting. It really just came down to Raikkonen and Alonso, the new kids on the block, who's going to be the next force to reckon with. But yeah, I thought Alonso was mega that season, and that whole team as well was so polished. Like if you think of French teams in Formula One, you probably don't think of teams as successful and as polished as Renault were in that era.
They've been building back up over the previous few years as well. Like they were building to that year, 2005.
Yeah.
Would you say it was the British foundations of the team more so than a French team that may have given it that stability?
Well, yeah, it was Benetton.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
with some French funding.
Yeah, and some engine building. Yeah.
Well, technically Tolman.
Yeah, it's funny. On a side note, there's a interesting YouTube doco that looks at the origins of all the current Formula One teams.
Yep.
And it's even funny. Like you just look at Mercedes, and technically you look at Honda racing against themselves.
Yeah.
In one iteration too, which is quite funny.
Yeah, Honda spent all that money buying that team, and then sold it.
Yeah.
And now it's Mercedes.
Yeah. It's so good.
And actually, BAR spent all that money. Now it's Mercedes. But that Renault's your favourite car, Brock?
Yeah. I mean, I like a lot of the cars from that era are mega. 2005 in particular, I think the cars look beautiful because they trimmed down a bit of the aero rules for that year off of 2004. They made the front wings a little bit higher, and the front wings a bit higher. The rear wings were brought forward a bit, and I don't know. I just love the way they look. I think that livery on that Renault is epic. Obviously, the last V10s, and there's just so many good liveries. Like the Minardi, everyone recognises the Minardis and the Jordan from then. They were just good-looking cars. It was before the the matte paint trend that's come in because it's slightly more beneficial for aero. So all the cars were painted and glossy and shiny, and yeah, it was just an awesome era. It was really cool, and that Renault, it sticks in my mind. It's a super cool car, and I liked it.
Yeah, Renault pulled off a rare trick by getting bright blue and bright yellow to work together on the car, because they're two colours that don't usually go together. But the Mild 7 blue and the Renault yellow just seemed to really, it was quite a nice livery.
Yeah, and the Telefonica on the rear wing. I don't know, it was just a good looking car. But so many of those cars were. I don't know what it was about the regulations that year. It's hard to think of an ugly car. The whole field, I thought, looked really good in that era. Those cars were beautiful. It's probably, the groove tyres were probably a bit lame. But
I think it's an understatement.
The Jordan in the Midland, that might be the one that looked a bit dodged. But that might have just been because I was used to the Benson and Hedges livery on the Jordans.
Having said all that, though, about the groove tyres, I struggle to imagine the cars in that era without the groove tyres.
Yeah, and you know what is interesting? You can see, like, if you watch an onboard, especially from 2003, 4, and 5, and 6 to a degree, is the driving style, especially in the low speed stuff, is so different to what you see today. Like today, it's all about precision and not like overslipping the tires. And back then, like Alonso and Raikkonen obviously picked up the technique super fast for it. And the way they sort of balance the car, but they just reef on as much lock as quick as possible. And when the tire starts going through that graining phase, it's basically they just induce crazy amounts of understeer and just push through the graining phase as quick as possible. But watching the onboards from that year is so different to any other era of Formula One that you watch, because they just had no front end grip at low speed. But from the outside shop, they look super light and super nimble because they were light and small cars. But just a strange era, and the onboards definitely have a different rhythm to them to a lot of other years.
I remember, Alonso's onboards with that really over-exaggerated understeer. Like you see him reef the wheel and the car would just push on and then eventually grip halfway through the corner, but obviously seemed to suit him down to the ground, whereas not as much as Fizzy.
Well, Fizzy is Fizzy the I'll reword that. Is Bottas the modern day Fisichella?
I think that's a slice on Bottas.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, Bottas is one like.
I think that's a slide on Fisichella.
No, Bottas's record is superior to Fisichella's.
Bottas has had better cars though.
Yeah. Like you look at that time back then.
Hang on. Fizzy has been in the Renault, 2005 World Championship car?
Yeah. So he had a Renault for 2 years. Yeah.
Jordan's 97 was okay.
He had a Minardi.
I'll take out 96. No, 96 is gone. 97 Jordan, 98 Benetton. So solid car, but not the outright best.
He was in a Force India for a bit there, wasn't he? 2008.
Yeah, it was rubbish. Yeah, and he finished 2009 Ferrari. Did the last quarter of the season, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I would say is Bottas has had a Mercedes for 4 or 5 years, whereas Fizzy had the Renault for 2. But you look at the amount of podiums, so Bottas has more wins, but I think overall podiums within those 2 seasons, Bottas outstrips Fisichella night and day.
Maybe statistically, but sitting on the couch with my expert opinion, I'll disagree strongly.
Ooh. I'm just going to bring up and have a look at Fizzy. So Fizzy finished 5th in the 2005 World Championship, 58 versus 133. So less than 50% of what Fernando Alonso scored in the same car, which is not great for one Fisichella. 2006.
Especially after he won the first race.
Well, yeah, he won the first race and then just hit an absolute roadblock. I don't think he finished the next.
Well, he crushed the next 3 races straight.
Yeah.
And he had that big crash at Eau Rouge.
Yes, yep.
And then we'll get
that was a really big crash.
And then when it gets to Japan, he doesn't cover himself in glory.
No.
Yeah. So Fizzy in 2006 ironically does better.
Oh, see.
Fourth with
here comes the back pedal.
No. Comparative to 2005, he did better. But he still only just scored 50% of Fernando Alonso's total for the year.
And what about Bottas versus Lewis?
Okay, do you want me to do each of these years or which?
I'll just do last year then, out of curiosity, because obviously it's the listeners are just dying to know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was going to say, because I think 2017 he was particularly good in his first year. Valtteri Bottas. Yeah, so he scored 223 to 347, which, doing some quick maths, is it's about a third. Sorry, so 66%. So his 2020 year is better than both of Fizzy's years relative to his teammate.
What do you reckon, Daniel? What do you reckon, Luke? Because stats are just numbers, they don't mean anything.
I actually think that was a good comparison, Bottas and Fisichella. Overall, they're both pretty good and can win races, but they just overshadowed by a more dominant teammate.
In fairness to both of them, they have come up against probably the two best drivers, probably being harsh on Vettel, throw Vettel in there. So 2 of the 3 best drivers of the last 20 years. Sorry, that's not being fair to Schumacher. Take Schumacher out. You think Vettel, Alonso, and Hamilton. So they're up against two of the greats.
I think what hurt Fisichella was that Alonso had basically been groomed for that World Championship since 2002. Or even 2001 in the Minardi, but when he joined Renault in 2002, I mean, they were building him for a championship run.
Definitely. I think ever since Schumacher left Benetton, Flavio was trying to work on the next prodigy, and Fernando was that in a lot of ways.
Well, in 98, Fisichella was probably the Alonso in terms of what Flavio was looking for in 98 when he joined, well, it was Benetton at that point. That was going to be his third season in F1. They ended up letting him go a couple of years later and then got him back for 05.
Was it right that at that point Flavio had something to do with Webber at that point and was trying to get him to go to Renault at that point, or was that when he was going from Williams to Red Bull?
No, Briatore became Webber's manager from 2001, I think.
Yeah.
Whenever he signed that testing deal with Benetton.
And he stayed his manager all the way through, I think, at an arm's distance after Flav got thrown out in 2008. But
so your point, Adam,
if he took that seat at Renault, who would have missed out, Fisichella or Alonso?
Fisichella. Fisichella would have just gone to Williams.
Because Fizzy was brought in from Sauer in 2004 into the open seat for 2005. But and it was actually Flavio who said he should go to Renault, and Webber said no, I want to go to Williams, and I think Flavio reminds him of that every single day.
What do you think was Alonso's best drive in 05?
For me, Imola, because that was like big pressure in front of an Italian crowd with Michael Schumacher, the guy, you're trying to knock off the perch, all over you. And that was I think that was their second race with the new car, with the new spec Ferrari.
Yep.
And everyone knows what Schumacher's like. And he had nothing to lose because he had such a bad start to the season, and he was sticking it in there. Like, there were a few times he actually got an overlap on Alonso, and Alonso was just totally calm. And then in his interview afterwards, they they asked him, what did you think when Schumacher was catching you? Were you prepared to give up the win? And he just said, no, the only thing I imagined was winning. And I think that'd be really hard to do with the 4-time world champion or of the last 4 years all over you. And I thought that was his best drive of the season. And in a way, I reckon mentally, he probably half won the championship there.
Yeah, hard to argue with Brock's assessment there, but just picking out some other key races, I think where he snuck the championship in Brazil was pretty impressive too, under all that pressure. And obviously that's when Raikkonen was going on his kind of back end of the season spree. Under all that pressure, he just relentlessly was ticking second places, third places, just accumulating points. And even though Raikkonen was winning, putting the pressure right back on him, which is impressive. And honourable mention to the Japanese Grand Prix, passing, like obviously not as good as Kimi, but he came back through the field to ultimately finish third, and he did that pass on Schumacher around the outside of 130R, which is pretty strong as well.
In itself to commit to do that at 130R.
And then he lost the position in the pits not long after, and then he had to pass Schumacher again.
And even that pass he pulled on Webber, that he basically went on the dirt. That was pretty.
That put him on the podium. What do you reckon his best drive was, Adam?
Oh, you can't go past as Brock said with the Imola race there. Me being a massive Michael Schumacher fan for many years, even in the, like you said, with the brand new car, the second race on it, Ferrari were trying to find their feet to bounce back, and he just held his nerve and came out and a race-winning drive worthy of a champion to hold that off. So that early in the season as well, I guess it kind of just stamped his own mark on it. So yeah, I'll have to go with Imola.
He didn't seem to let any pressure get to him all year. He drove like he'd won plenty of championships, whether it was Imola or whether it was Brazil at the end of the year or just throughout the year. He drove like he'd done it all before.
Yeah, and like even how he handled himself in like the press conferences and everything else like that, it was just calm, nothing, not letting anything slip or anything like that. It was just pretty calculated from him.
I reckon one of his best drives was the Australian Grand Prix. He got caught out in the wet qualifying, which put him down the back of the grid, and he drove through and he finishes third on the podium. Him and Barrichello actually sort of came through the field, and they sort of came from nowhere to sort of jump Coulthard and Webber and those guys. And then you wonder if that gave him a bit of a psychological lift as well, because Fisichella won the race, but he just mowed it around in front, did it easy. But then Alonzo sort of fought his way through the whole field and got up to third. And I think that was one of his good drives as well.
If you win a championship, can you really have one outstanding race that puts it over the other? Because you got to build it up over the span of the season. There's a couple of pivotal moments, but yeah, if you start it off well, good front foot, and keep going like that. So it
was impressive they won the last race as well at China.
So isn't that a bit odd, finishing it that year at China?
Taking the words out of my mouth, Adam. What a weird track to finish the year at. They should have stuck with Brazil.
I agree. That was China's second year, and I guess they paid for it. I don't know.
Yeah, when you think of and fittingly it wasn't, but when you think of final race championship decider, you don't think of the China Autodrome.
I personally don't think of Abu Dhabi either, but that's what we've got at the moment.
Well, you got Jerez, which was 97 when Villeneuve and Schumacher had their one.
That wasn't the most inspiring circuits to close the season either.
Well, it was supposed to be Estoril, but it got replaced during the year by Jerez.
Well, then prior to that, you had Adelaide until they moved it to Melbourne, which was street track in Australia, so you can't go wrong with finishing a season there.
There's a couple of things I wanted to ask you guys about the 2005 season. So
go for it.
The first is like this is just your opinion, because I thought this was quite interesting, and I remember watching it as a kid thinking that's interesting. Was they brought in the rule one engine for 2 race weekends, which back then was, a complete disaster and ridiculous. So BAR in Australia were running outside of the points. Of course, the points didn't run the full top 10 back then. And on the last lap, both BARs come in and retire to get fresh engines for Malaysia, which then blow up on the second lap of the Malaysian Grand Prix. So I'd like your opinion on BAR's start to the season after a pretty strong 2004 season.
Well, it ain't got worse from there for him.
Well, yeah. Well, let's remember even before then, Button tried to leave the team
Yes.
to join Webber at Williams. I mean, I don't blame him. I mean, one engine per 2 races rule. I mean, that just at the end of the day, that's almost begging teams to do that are out of points.
Contention.
Yeah, if it just encourages people to do those sort of things. A bit like nowadays when people take engine penalties when they get a grid penalty and things like that. It's just like people are going to take advantage of those sort of rules. But yeah, and it didn't get any better because they got disqualified from Imola for running an underweight car, and then they got kicked out of Barcelona and Monaco.
But they had to hold on to those engines that they ran in Imola, didn't they? So they missed, the car sat idle since Imola, and they had to run those engines untouched when they returned.
They did. And the whole underweight thing is quite interesting. We should probably talk about that because that hasn't happened since.
No.
But basically is after the race, they drained the fuel out of the car and weighed it, and everything was all good. And then the FIA had a further look at it and discovered an additional sort of hidden fuel tank in a different part of the car and drained that. And the car came in about 5 or 6 kilos underweight. And what they had been doing is like moving the fuel around as a ballast, and they could like pump it between the 2 tanks. And so the rule was the car dry with no fuel has to weigh 600 kilos, and the car dry without fuel actually weighed 594 kilos, I think. So that was a 2-race ban.
I love the ingenuity, but it's one of those things. If you get caught, then you deserve you pay the price. But I mean, that's some good thinking to try and get around.
It's only cheating. It's only cheating once you get caught.
And they got caught.
But
yeah.
But you think off that high of 2004, their 2005 season was an absolute disaster. No wonder they sold out at the end of the year.
Well, because they got banned for 2 races. Did they cop a fine as well?
I don't believe they did.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's interesting. Usually
they may have, but I'm not aware of them. Certainly nothing significant enough to be in the memory bank.
Maybe the fine was they got sent home from Barcelona, so they paid all the money to get there.
True.
And they got turned around.
Because they appealed it, or was it the FIA appealed the stewards at the time, or it was something like that.
The FIA appealed the stewards, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
BAR tried to claim that the car was never underweight during the race, but then there was sort of no way to prove that it wasn't underweight.
Yeah.
At some point during the race. And they said the rule was pretty clear cut. They said you can't use fuel to ballast your car overweight.
Well, the other thing is, with no fuel, the car has to be 600 kilos, and with no fuel, the car was not 600 kilos, which again that's a good 300 kilos lighter than the cars today when they're sitting on the grid. So again, like, can we just point out that these current cars seriously need to lose some weight? That's not very Formula One.
Need to lose some weight, lose a turbo, and gain some cylinders,
and shorten themselves up.
Yeah. Do you know the greatest irony though is this was the same Tyrrell team that was excluded from the 1984 championship for the same thing. similar thing, running underweight.
Oh, with the water wheels. Was too, yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, obviously, BAR purchasing Tyrrell. So it was in the blood.
And it's also the team that's won the last 7 World Championships.
Mm-hmm.
That's Mercedes now.
Another highlight of that year, which seems to be forgotten these days, Luke, was a Williams going across the Harbour Bridge.
Yep. Webber drove the Williams across the Sydney Harbour Bridge the weekend before the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne.
Were you there?
I wasn't there. I did get up and watch it on TV, though. They had it live on Channel 10 Sunday morning. It was pretty awesome. It was pretty cool.
Very cool.
It's something it would only ever work as a one-off. I think if you did it again, it'd just be, we've seen that before. But I think that stopping traffic on a Sunday morning to do that was well worth it. I think it did get the sort of attention that the New South Wales government were after. Although I'm not sure how happy the Victorian government were.
Yeah, I think they were pissed.
Well, they get the Grand Prix, so they can't complain too much.
Well, I think what the Victorian people were buying up about is they pay $40 million to get the Grand Prix. And here the New South Wales government is shutting down a bridge for a couple of hours and getting, you wouldn't say the same coverage, but access to their product, so to speak.
The bit I liked about it was that I think Webber was technically supposed to drive at 60 kilometres an hour over it. He went a little bit quicker than that, but I mean he couldn't really go for it because you could see how bumpy it was.
Yeah, there's bumps that you could sit in a Lamborghini road car and not feel bumps. Like there's some bumps, but the F1 car looks like it's going through a Woolworths car park. Yes, it's pretty funny. It's like darting left to right, and they would have jacked as much ride height into that thing as they could.
Yeah, it looked good though. It was. I wish I'd gone.
Here's a question for you: what would you have been able to see? Obviously, you would have heard the thing.
It's just for the sound, I reckon.
Yeah, that'd be the only thing because you couldn't stand on the edge of the Harbour Bridge. You had to stand down and look up at it.
I think the trick would have been to be on a train.
On the train,
right.
on the train, or on the bridge climb.
Bridge climb, yeah, exactly.
Or be the first car waiting at either end.
Imagine being that person who doesn't follow F1, doesn't do anything like that, wanted to go off in the morning for their bridge climb, and they go, oh, geez, there's no cars on the bridge today. I want to watch all the cars come across and did all this. Then next thing, Mark Webber just flies down in the Williams and scares the living hell out of him.
I think a lot of people complained about it too.
Good.
There
Sucked
are a lot.
in.
Yeah.
Good. I hope it echoed for hours afterwards.
The people from North Sydney probably would have been unhappy that their bridge was shut for him to come across.
Oh, it's good if we want to keep him out.
Nice Sunday morning. Thankfully, it wasn't peak hour.
Yeah. Well, I think the Sunday morning worked well as well. They had the breakfast TV there and everything, and I think it did the job. They should have had Heidfeld there too and had drag races across there.
Yeah, that's a mad idea. They absolutely should have done that, Luke.
What's the next fact from 2005?
Well, there's plenty to discuss. I think probably the big one that we've glossed over is the change from change in rules to only one set of tyres for an entire race, unless you had to change one for safety reasons. So was that an attempt by Formula One to take some advantage of Ferrari, or was it just a genuinely organic rule change that happened to hurt Ferrari and Bridgestone?
Oh, I would think it was to try and change up the pecking order a little.
I agree with you. The only thing is, the FIA would have had no idea that change specifically would, hurt Ferrari and Bridgestone so much and help, the Michelin runners so much. I agree. I think they were trying to shake things up, but there was no way of predicting it was going to be that significant to flip the field on its head.
I think it was aimed at I think it was aimed specifically at Ferrari, in as much as Ferrari had dominated 2004, and they wanted to close things up for 2005. Similar way that after Ferrari dominated 2002, for 2003 in came one lap qualifying and Parc Fermé, the start of the Parc Fermé rules. So I didn't mind the one tyre rule.
It was surprising how much it hurt the early, or the A spec, or 2004 Ferrari that they modified to run for 2005. It was absolutely nowhere. I think they qualified 12th and 13th for the first race of the year, somewhere around there.
But it was wet as well, so they got caught out in that first race. So
that is a fair point, and I probably should have acknowledged that. Yeah, but it ended up with Schumacher being caught by Heidfeld, and that Williams was not, really a top 3 car, much. Caught by Heidfeld, and they ended up coming together. So this is from the same chassis essentially that has set every lap record known to man just 12 months earlier. So it really hurt Ferrari, left them scrambling to design that B spec car, which ended up being a lot better, but Bridgestone just never got their heads around it.
I think it mixed it up a bit. It was a change from the tyre pit stops.
Yeah, it was good in the sense that there was a lot of push. If you listen to the team radio from 2005, there was a lot of push. Come on, push harder, which you don't hear a lot of now. It's almost like a treat. Right at the end of the race, you can push to get fastest lap.
Yeah.
But in that era, those tyres were concrete, and most of the time when they started graining up, which was generally inevitable if you were in traffic, you had to push to burn through the graining phase. So, that was probably a good side effect of it. One other thing that is also often forgotten is Renault's unbelievable launch control in 2005 and 2006.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the best launch control systems, certainly legal launch control systems that have ever been run in Formula One. And there's lots of rumours as to how they did it, but nothing else could come close. Even after 2 years of trying to develop their own, nobody could get near Renault.
I think it was the same launch control system that they ran in 94.
That's throwing it out there.
In 2004, I think that was when they first started perfecting it, because I remember they were getting some good starts in 04 towards the end of the year.
Yeah, so I read something. The theory is that there was some sort of jump start indicator. I don't know how, but basically they reckon the launch control could sense when the jump start indicator had switched off, and it would react immediately, and it could react faster than a human could to the lights. And I don't know whether it was something in the ECU or I don't know. That's just what I read. I probably shouldn't have said that because I couldn't possibly explain how it works. But that was an interesting theory.
It helped them. Although there were some races where the McLarens beat them off the line. So
it was rare though.
Yeah, very, very rare. Very rare. Remember, I think it was Spa. Montoya's on pole and Alonso's alongside him, and Montoya just takes off.
I guess the sad thing of 2005, for me anyway, was the last year of Minardi, Jordan, and Sauber.
NBAR.
NBAR, yes.
Yep.
So that was sad in a way, I thought.
Oh, very. Especially as Minardi had their Australian owner, Paul Stoddart.
Yep.
I guess he just had enough by then, after 5 years running the team.
So we know, Daniel, you're a bit of a Christian Albers fan. So how did that impact you, knowing it was the end of Christian Albers driving a Minardi?
Well, I had high hopes that he'd be picked up by one of the other teams, carried over into Toro Rosso. But yeah, no, it was very sad to see the end of the Minardi name on the grid.
And Christian Albers driving a Minardi more specifically.
Well, yes, yeah. I don't know. It was hard to differentiate the two. But yeah, no, Christian Albers much better than his record allows or suggests, would be fair to say. Where did he wind up post Formula One?
Well, he came from the DTM, and he
Okay.
just went back. Yeah, he just went back to the DTM. But I mean, he hung around in F1 for a bit. He was with Spiker in 2006 and 7. But yeah, then he just went back to DTM.
Yeah, no, I'd throw him in the mix of your Ralph Furmans and your Patrick Freesakers and your
you put in, I don't know, I reckon you'd probably, like, if I'm looking at it objectively, I'd say Hamilton-ish level. Verstappen, Albers, they sound... Look, I'm a bit of an Albers fan, so I'll put him right up there.
Well, I mean, he'd done really good in DTM with Mercedes, so it was a shame that after Minardi went away, it's a shame Mercedes didn't put him in the McLaren in 2006 when Montoya got sacked mid-year. But he went back to DTM and he never ever recaptured the DTM form that he had before 2005.
Should we discuss Trulli and his, to be honest, incredible qualifying efforts for most of the year?
The Trulli train.
Yeah.
Which is what it led to.
He was an absolute beast over one lap.
He has to be one of the best. Seriously, whatever car you put him in, he would always put it 2 or 3 grid rows higher than where it probably should be. So phenomenal qualifier in 2005, and that Toyota was decent, but man, he got some good laps out of that thing.
He was very good in 2005, and the Toyota was very good, and it's weird in a way that Schumacher got more points than him in the championship. Ralph Schumacher.
Well, as you said, Schumacher, I think, just bagged those 2 podiums, which Trulli got 1 podium, so that evens out. Actually,
he should have got.
He got 3. Trulli got 3 podiums.
He should have got more though, because he was up the front so many times, and but
shows you the strength of that Toyota, the greatest Toyota F1 car of all time. That in 2009.
Yeah, 2009 was a good car.
It shows how ineffective the Trulli train was, though. If it only ended up getting him three podiums. Just one more thing, Jarno Trulli's hair.
What about it?
I'd forgotten how impressive it was.
Well, I don't know what's more impressive, his hair or these sunglasses.
You couldn't have one without the other. You see him post-race, and obviously he's sweaty and all that, and the hair's under a hat, and it just looks like he's just got long hair. But then there was a shot on the review of him just about to put his balaclava on before the start of the race, and he's just got this massive mane.
Was it as good as Antonio Liuzzi's mullet?
Well, we're Australian, so there's nothing better than a mullet.
Okay.
You don't agree?
Oh, look, I'm a bit of a Trulli fan, so yeah, I don't have a problem with these luscious locks.
No, I love them. I don't know how he started putting them into a man bun. I think in later years, didn't he?
I think he did. Yeah.
By the time he was in the caterum.
I thought when you were talking about diamonds, I thought you were talking about Kimi Raikkonen's helmet at Monaco when he had diamonds on his helmet as well.
But you know what? At least they put them on his helmet rather than on the nose cone like they did on the Jaguar. And like $250,000 diamond went missing after a shunt in practice and has never been found.
But have you heard the conspiracy?
What's the conspiracy?
That there was never
it was never put into the nose cone.
Yeah, there's like a dummy diamond, and basically it was always going to be lost.
What did we think of the combined qualifying that they had for the first 6 races?
I liked it, but not from a traditional qualifying sense. So obviously from a traditional qualifying stats history sense, it's terrible. But I do like the randomness. It did mix up the grids. And I love single lap qualifying. So 1 car on track, 1 chance, all the sponsors get their value for money. You know, they all get the same amount of airtime. Personally, I liked it. But I understand it's not a popular opinion.
I think the 1 lap could have worked if you didn't have to run on your race fuel for it. Like, you still get that thing and you get the quickest car out to the front and everything. It did mix up the results for it, but yeah, I can't say I was the biggest fan of it.
I just found it confusing. Not confusing, but always a good thing about qualifying was everyone had a crack and you knew who the pole person was, like the pole winner. Whereas I just found it so drawn out, and it just took too long and lost a bit of interest.
How does it how's it rate up against F1 this year, where you go qualifying into a sprint race into that sets the grid for the Grand Prix on the Sunday?
So what
Nah.
if we had to pick? What would we? Yeah.
Aggregate qualifying was better, man. Aggregate, it wasn't too bad. I think if they reversed it, so on the Saturday was the fuel load quali run, and then Sunday was Friday first qualifying was your fuel load quali run, and then Saturday was your all out qualifying run. I think if they reversed it, would have been better. But having the main qualifying session with your race fuel was a bit crap.
Yeah, I didn't really mind the aggregate qualifying.
I'm shocked.
My only issue with it, though, and really my issue with the one lap qualifying is one of the beauties of qualifying is always that it's someone just throwing everything at one lap. And I've always found with one lap qualifying, because they don't have a second chance, people are maybe not always giving it everything.
But that's probably a good point. Like if you know roughly from practice where your lap time speed is and what everyone else is doing, if you're in and around, say around 10th to 14th, is one or two spots going to make a bigger difference. So did they hold back so they didn't take as much out of the tyres to give them a better shot in the race?
Well, that's where the second part of it, running on your race fuel, came in, I guess. People would see where they were after the first lap and then fuel themselves accordingly for the second. I didn't really like qualifying with your race fuel, but I could see why they did it. I could see what they were trying to achieve. I'd have rather they just did them almost did them back to back, because one of the reasons they changed the rule halfway through the year back to a single qualifying lap on race fuel was that they thought people didn't like there not being a result on Sunday afternoon, because qualifying wasn't the pole sitter wasn't then crowned until Sunday morning.
Yeah, and the press couldn't write stories, and yeah.
So I don't see why they just didn't move the second run to Saturday afternoon as well. You could do them both in an hour.
Well, I think the one lap qualifying, it did take about an hour, but 2 hours you could do it for sure.
Yeah, or if in terms of what Daniel was saying, it can get a bit drawn out watching the one car just go around. Send two out at a time, half a lap apart.
Was it actually boring though? Like, I never found the one lap qualifying boring to watch. I actually thought it was quite spectacular.
No. Brock, the Australian Grand Prix, I remember that day. I took off uni early to come and watch the qualifying, or actually practice and then qualifying. And I was excited because it was something new. I thought Webber was going to be, actually was pretty competitive that weekend. Yeah, but honestly, by midway through the year, nah. Do you know what I mean? That's when it became the same thing. Like them in every track, the same kind of experience. Yeah. But it's like having the Bathurst 1000 qualifying at every round.
They've tried that. They did it for years.
Oh, did they? And how'd it go?
Top 10 shootouts.
Top 15, mate. We're going to go. Top 15s were the GOAT.
I think pretty much every year from probably 2000 to 2006, 2007, they had shootouts at just about every round.
Okay. And do they still do it now?
No. Everyone said it made the Bathurst one less special.
The worst thing they did, and I'm sorry to talk about supercars, but was that sprint round at the start of this year, they did 2 shootouts.
At least they weren't full field shootouts. Imagine that around Bathurst.
I take your point with the supercar shootouts and the F1, but top 15 shootouts were the pinnacle of motorsport.
However, I will say this. Superpole in World Superbike back in the day at Phillip Island, I thrived on that.
There was something about Superpole qualifying in World Superbikes, yeah. But it was just the same thing, which is weird. Except you got a Rolex if you got pole.
Not bad. I'd take that.
So I guess the consensus is F1 qualifying in 2005 was okay. We didn't hate it. We didn't love it, but it was okay. So
it was interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Different. It was like the one tire rule. It was different.
Yeah, it was all right. You don't look back and be like, oh, that's the worst thing they ever did, like going to hybrids. You're just like, oh,
No.
It's pretty cool, whatever.
That's a good way of summing it up, actually. That's a very good way of summing it up. And on that, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment. Breakthrough Health and Wellness. The Breakthrough 60-Day Challenge combines a highly effective weight loss program and a high-end personal fitness experience without costly memberships. In a culture of flash workouts and going hard, Breakthrough have taken a more sustainable approach and developed the perfect program that will not only get you fit and healthy, but also help you shed stubborn weight that you thought was never going to budge. Breakthrough will offer new inspiration and goals that will lead to life changes you can easily maintain. Each week, Breakthrough offer interesting muscular endurance, strengthening and functional movement exercises with a training app that will rival any workout you have done at the gym. For more information, visit mybreakthrough.com.au. That's MYBreakthru and follow Breakthrough on Facebook and Instagram. Welcome back to our podcast looking back on the 2005 Formula One season. Juan Montoya, what do we think of his season? Ever since he, especially since he came back from the tennis accident. Was the laugh there insinuating it might not have been a tennis accident?
Rumor has it may not have been.
Maybe a motorcycle accident.
And didn't someone say he was playing tennis whilst on a motorbike? And that's what the.
It's nearly as good as the Alan McNish one for the race of 1,000 years in Adelaide. The different stories getting around for that.
Do you think his 05 season was a disappointment? He won 3 races.
It was very, very inconsistent. A few unforced errors, getting disqualified for leaving the pit lane while the red light was on, for example. But
do you reckon that was just a brain explosion on his part there?
It was just deliberate because he was frustrated that the team didn't call him in just as the safety car was called, I reckon. But yeah. I think in true Montoya fashion, he did not give a crap.
He had some high highs and some low lows. Like, obviously, Canada was a low, but I mean, the races he won quite convincingly.
He was fast. He was just super inconsistent.
And he never seemed to really gel at McLaren. Obviously, it's easy to look in hindsight, but at the time we thought it was a strange move, moving from Williams to McLaren. But, just never really looked comfortable there, did he?
If memory serves, he only signed the McLaren contract because he was angry at Williams.
Yeah, if you think about Dennis and Montoya, it's like oil and water.
It was either going to work or it wasn't. It was either going to work really well or it wasn't going to work at all. But I think given he signed with them in a huff after he got angry at Williams at Magny Corps in 2003, and then went and signed with them for 2005, McLaren for 2005, that was possibly an inauspicious start.
Yeah, and one they never really came back from.
Could you have seen at the end of 05, though, that Montoya was only going to last another half a season in Formula One and then he'd be gone for good?
Yeah, probably, because he didn't seem to have the passion for it.
Not like he did when he came in 01, anyway.
Nah, definitely not. So I think in hindsight, the writing was on the wall, but I think he was a massive loss. Like, a lot of people liked Montoya. I really liked Montoya. His driving style and his personality, he was very unique. He was there for himself most of the time. Obviously, he was a pretty decent team player, actually, Montoya. But on track battles, he definitely raced for himself. He was super aggressive. He didn't care who you were. Didn't care if his car was slower. He would fight to the death. And he was an awesome driver and super, like, looking back on it, he was actually a super refreshing person to have on the grid. And I think he added a lot to F1. But I think in hindsight, you could see it was coming to an end.
Well, even 2006, when he left halfway through the season, I mean, he'd gotten 2 or 3 podiums that year in that first half of the season. So he was still, if the passion had gone, he was still able to put in the good performances.
Yeah, the way he finished 2005, I thought he was kind of like he retired from Japan and China, but he was, on the back of those wins that he took in Monza and Interlagos. Well, I was kind of thinking he was setting himself up for 2006, but then the McLaren was such a disappointment in 2006 as well. So I think with any kind of motivation waning, it just took the wind out of his sails.
Well, you mentioned Japan, Montoya's retirement. He was run off the track by Villeneuve, wasn't he?
Payback for Monaco.
Matter of opinion, but yeah.
Well, and probably Villeneuve in his comeback season after having the majority of 2004 off, could you argue maybe his passion for it wasn't exactly there either by that point? Because it was a bit of a lackluster season. I mean, he was only in a Sauber, but...
Yeah, like lackluster. When he scored 9 points.
Yeah, he had 3 retirements.
Yeah, and he went pretty close to Massa as well. Like, I think it was actually a decent enough season based on the expectations for him. Because you think when he came back for that Renault in 2004, he'd been out of the sport for a year, but he was a long way off Alonso. So you think a world champion taking a Sauber drive, and in the end, his timing didn't work out, but it could have worked in his favour when BMW picked up the team for 2006.
I think it was pretty clear BMW didn't want him, though.
Yeah, they were trying to find a way to get Kubica in. Yeah.
One thing I do have to say about that Sauber, though, is I reckon Brock will contend this. I reckon the Sauber was the best-looking car on the grid.
Oof.
Just like in terms of I love the paint job on it.
It was very recognisable. I'll give it that.
Yeah, I mean they basically had the same look for 11 years from 95 until 2005. Little bit of a white added to it in 2001, but it was the same general design. And I thought it looked quite good.
Are you a Credit Suisse customer?
I'm not, so obviously the advertising didn't work, but it did make me know what Credit Suisse is.
I wonder, cars like that, I wonder how would they have gone if they were on a different tyre?
Well, yeah, although probably not any better if they were on a Bridgestone, perhaps in 2005.
Yeah, it's just something I ponder sometimes.
Well, when you look at the makeup of the field too, yeah, and that Indianapolis race showed it. But yeah, to think Ferrari were the only team on the only competitive team on Bridgestones, which probably explains, when you've got 7 of 10 teams or whatever the thing was, single tyres per race, they just weren't accumulating any data Bridgestone.
Yeah.
Which, probably if there was a gap, it just really drove it home and reinforced it.
And 2/3 of your data was coming from the 4 slowest cars on the grid.
But back then, they didn't have as many testing restrictions as there is now. So, like, Ferrari would have had their test drivers buzzing around Fiorano and Mugello and all that sort of stuff, collecting tyre data for them.
Yeah. There was very little testing restrictions. So, and also, I believe in this era, from memory, you could the tyres could be tailored to each team. So, like the Ferrari Bridgestones weren't the same as the Minardi Bridgestones, but also by the same token, the McLaren Michelins weren't the same as the Renault Michelins. Similar, but tailored to each car's needs. Mark Webber, based on his 2005 season, do you think he made the right choice signing for Williams, or should he have taken up the option to sign for Renault to partner Alonso?
On paper, Williams seemed like a reasonable choice. Nobody could foresee what would happen in 2005. And if I think all of us at the end of 2004, if you were Webber, you'd pick Williams. Yeah,
I think so too. And I actually think in hindsight, still he was better off to go to Williams.
Ooh.
Because, well, look at what happened to Fisichella alongside Alonso.
That's a fair point.
Now, like I'm the biggest Webber fan you can find. F1 hasn't been the same for me since he stopped racing, but the team was being built around Alonso, and I don't think he could have necessarily challenged Alonso for the championship.
You know what though? It would have been really interesting seeing him go head to head because Alonso's never been regarded as an amazing qualifier, and Webber has always been a very strong qualifier, especially in that era on those tyres. Like he used to stick that Jaguar right up the front quite regularly. So it is actually interesting, like Alonso versus Webber, certainly on the qualifying side of it, how that would have panned out.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, I think if you have the opportunity to be in a championship car, do you know what I mean? Especially you think what 2006 was for him as well. Being managed by Flavio, even if he did get decently beaten, or not decent, but he still got beaten by Alonso, which I'm sure he would have. In the pathway to Red Bull probably is the same.
Or he stays on for 2007 once Alonso's gone.
He should have gone to BAR and hung around until they were Mercedes. And now he'd be like a 6-time world champion.
Well, didn't Button dodge a bullet by staying with BAR for 2005 and not going to Williams like he originally signed to do?
Yeah. He carried on like a bit of a fool, but paid dividends in the end.
Because that 05, that was when BMW, I guess, got sick of Williams. Is that fair to say?
I think there were murmurs or trouble ever since really 2002 season. There was discontent, but yeah, you're right. It hit the path of no return end of 2004, start 2005.
What do you think Webber's best race was in 2005?
Do you know what? If he didn't run into Montoya at the first corner of Nürburgring, I think that would have been his race. That would have been his best race because he qualified unbelievably on more fuel than everyone around him. Yeah, but on considerably more fuel, like way more fuel than Heidfeld, way more fuel. I remember saying on fuel correction, he was the fastest car in that qualifying session. So I think that had his potential. But overall, I think as much as he was unhappy about it, his first podium in Monaco was something to savour.
Did we ever get the full story as to what happened in that race? As to why they pitted Heidfeld first before Webber, which was always obviously going to allow Heidfeld to get in front of him?
I think at the time, wasn't it, because it was single tyre and refueling, wasn't the thinking was going longer? Like in a normal situation, going longer.
Well, they
faster.
They were boxed up behind Alonso.
Yeah.
And because when Albers spun at Mirabeau and Coulthard slowed down and then Schumacher ran up the back of him and it caused a safety car. That was on about lap 20 or something. Alonso pitted and he took on enough fuel then to go to the end of the race, which just stuffed his tyres. So he had Webber and Heidfeld stuck up behind him and Webber couldn't get past him. So maybe 20 laps to go, something like that. Webber and Heidfeld are boxed up behind Alonso and they called Heidfeld in first to refuel. He refuels, goes out and straight away is going a couple of seconds a lap faster than Alonso and Webber.
In the clean air, yeah.
Yeah, which was always going to happen because Alonso was going so slow.
Yeah. I don't believe they realised that was going to happen, if that made sense. Like I don't think it was an orchestrated move. I think they were just whether it was like a pre-scheduled, you'll pit on this lap, and then they didn't react. Yeah, but yeah, as you said, it worked very much in Heidfeld's favour. Jumped out and pulled that pretty sweet move on Alonso.
Well,
the Harbourside chicane, yeah.
All I can think of there is that maybe it was an equivalent of nowadays when, was it a few years ago, Valtteri Bottas was boxed up behind someone and Hamilton said, I can get past him if you let me have a go. So they told Bottas to move aside. Hamilton tried to overtake, ultimately couldn't get the job done. So they swapped him back on the last lap and let Bottas in front of him. Maybe it was Williams' way of letting Heidfeld have a go at trying to pass Alonso.
I don't remember any of that on the radio, though. I just remember Webber being absolutely pissed.
Oh, yeah, he was very unhappy on the podium.
That's Webber and Williams just summed up in a sentence by Daniel. I just remember Webber being pissed. Does anyone want to discuss Ralph Schumacher's crash on Monaco weekend? It was a pretty good one.
Oh, that was a huge one.
Like, you don't see many crashes at Tabac.
Mm.
Certainly not single car crashes.
And when he turned in, it turned like an arrow.
Which he said that all previous through the weekend that it understeered a bit more, so he tried to turn it in just a fraction earlier to keep on, and it stuck that time, and that's why he hit the inside wall.
Geez, he had some crashes in the back end of his career.
The Melbourne one.
2 at Indy, and then the one at Monaco. It's
Well, should we discuss the practice 2? A 4-car crash in practice 2, heading up the hill out of Saint Devote, which the stewards ruled was caused by Montoya brake testing Jacques Villeneuve.
Yeah, and then Coulthard ran up. Was it Coulthard ran up the back of Villeneuve?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was someone else involved. I can't remember who now. It's a bit of Montoya, a bit of Colombian fire involved in that one, I think.
And especially to do it in front of Villeneuve, because them two had a bit of history as well.
Yeah, so that's what my theory is. The Suzuka incident was Villeneuve's payback.
Probably was. Speaking of Webber, for us to watch him in Australia that year, we obviously had to watch on Channel 10. And that was the third year that Channel 10 had been covering Formula One after taking over the TV rights from Channel 9 in 2003. Do you guys remember the website F1 Fans versus Channel 9?
No.
It was set up in around 2000 by some...
It was set up by you, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't set up for me. I did subscribe to the website though. It had a good little trading area where people could trade Formula One races they had on tape. So that was actually quite handy. But no, the website was set up to try and lobby Channel 9 they were sick of the time slots that Channel 9 were showing the Grand Prix in sort of the late 90s into the early 2000s, because Channel 9 had the TV rights since early 1981. And yeah, by 2000, really, it seems like after 1999, they'd sort of lost a bit of interest. In 2000, 2001, 2002, on average, you wouldn't hear much about the Formula One races in between events, and then their TV times were usually around somewhere between 10:30 and 11 p.m. They'd start playing the races, and obviously back then it was a 10 p.m. race start Australian time. It usually depended on the length of the Sunday night movie, what time they'd cross to the Formula One. So there was obviously a push for Channel 10, who called themselves the home of motorsport at the time, and they had a huge range of motorsport properties, and Formula One got added to that in 2003. But by 2005, I guess the love affair with Channel 10 had worn off, because a website was started up by then called F1 Fans versus Channel 10, because they didn't like the time slots that Channel 10 was showing the Formula One races on, because Channel 10 still weren't showing them live. It was a hard, usually 10:30 p.m. start time, because Channel 10 were they were the first commercial station to stop playing a Sunday night movie. They'd play a couple of TV shows, and then 10:30 p.m. they'd cross to the Formula One. But that was basically the races at that point were all we got. We didn't get any live qualifying, and certainly no practice. But yeah, by then Channel 10's coverage was wearing a bit thin. What are our memories of Channel 10 broadcasting F1 around that time?
I have very clear memories of Neil Crompton would do the quick rundown of what happened in qualifying during the supercar race of that day, and he'd give you like the weather forecast, and it was just good times. That's my memory of Channel 10 covering the F1.
Yeah, I didn't have too much of a problem with the Channel 9 broadcast, and equally the Channel 10 broadcast was pretty good. I wasn't jumping on any forums badgering anyone about start times or things like that. And I picked up the world feed, so that was pretty good. No complaints from me.
How about you, Adam?
To be honest, my memory's a bit limited, going back on the ins and outs of the coverage, but I think I just joined in, watched the races, and nothing sticks to mind for it.
I think ultimately, by then the change to Channel 10 was for the better. Bill Woods and Darrell Eastlake are equivalents, I suppose. What Bill Woods had interest, whereas Darrell Eastlake had passion. And Neil Crompton, while he didn't have the Formula One experience, I think he had his nose a bit more to the ground a bit more in terms of the current day Formula One, whereas Alan Jones a lot of the time relied on, which by then was getting on to 20-year-old experience in Formula One. But also by the early 2000s, Channel 9 didn't have any weekend sports shows to sort of build up to the Formula One, because after 99 they'd axed the Wide World of Sports TV show on Saturday afternoons, which used to carry a lot of Formula One content, and Sports Sunday was gone on Sunday afternoon. So basically you only heard from Darrell and AJ every couple of Sundays, whereas Channel 10 would sort of build the Formula One up through RPM. They'd usually review qualifying and everything on a Sunday arvo, and then, as Brock said, they'd talk about it during the V8s on a Sunday afternoon leading into the race on a Sunday night. But probably where Channel 10 let themselves down was the 2005 Japanese Grand Prix, which clashed with the 2005 Super Cheap Auto 1000 at Bathurst. So Channel 10 basically, after the V8 race finished, they had about an hour or so before the 10 News started on the Sunday evening. So they shoehorned the Japanese Grand Prix, which was, I think we'll all agree, just about the best race of the year. They shoehorned that into an hour. And if you watch the Channel 10 coverage of that race, Kimi Räikkönen doesn't make a pit stop.
Just disgraceful by Channel 10 to cut the second best race behind Imola of the year in half. And Räikkönen should get a penalty for not making a fuel stop.
Did they offer any kind of replay link, like full replay?
Oh, not from memory. I'm pretty sure I would have taped it if they did.
Yeah.
But I don't. I think it was only years later that I saw the race in full. That's when I found out, Kimi Räikkönen did make a pit stop in that race. But that, I guess, brings us from arguably the best race, along with Imola, brings us probably to the worst race of the year, the US Grand Prix at Indianapolis.
Worst race because of the spectacle that it was of 6 cars on the grid, or?
Mate, 2 Minardis in the points, Christian Albers, outstanding. What's bad about it?
Yeah, I know. Schumacher wins. What else?
I heard it described as the day Formula One ate itself, and I think that was the telling point. That was some of the most ridiculous, stubborn single-mindedness that will, in a way, set Formula One racing back 10 years in the US.
I have never heard a decent idea for how to avoid what happened, though.
Well, there isn't one.
Yeah, because they couldn't change the track because the FIA wouldn't have had.
Could they have not changed the track?
They couldn't. It has to go through a full approval. They can't, because if they put in a chicane, that's a logical thing. But if someone has an accident at that chicane and dies, or a flag marshal's killed, or a wheel goes into the crowd and he goes to court, the judge is going to go, well, that's great that you put in a chicane, but the chicane wasn't approved and there were no safety checks done on it, and so you're completely liable.
But in IndyCar, they've constructed temporary chicanes overnight. In that era. That's what I don't understand. I fully agree that you can't have you know what I mean? Michelin needed to be penalised for not bringing a tyre that suited it. But I just still struggle to see how 6 cars running around was the best option out of everything available for that Grand Prix.
But I guess it's if you put, speed restrictions or something through there, then you're disadvantaging the 6 Bridgestone shod cars to say, well, because your tyre manufacturer brought a tyre to the race that could withstand everything that it needed, that they're going to peg them back to to the rest of the field for it. So that's doing something like that, a speed limit or something like that through it, would make it a bit of a question mark over the result for it.
Yeah, I think everything that I've read about that event was all the Michelin teams were pretty much happy to put their hand up and, in a way, concede the result. Yeah, or take penalties that basically ensured the Bridgestone teams, finished ahead, but just to do something to ensure that there was a race. But event obviously didn't happen.
I think from the 2005 review, they asked Michael Schumacher about that. And I can't remember word for word, but he quoted something that happened at Monza from the drivers' meeting, that the drivers should get together and make a pact to do something to do it.
Not overtake. Yeah, in the first chicane.
And the first two chicanes, and have yellow flags and stuff there. And a couple of people came out and said, we won't be doing that. We're here to race. We're here to win. So, he made some comment saying that it wasn't okay to do it then, but now you want to do it because you're on the other end of it. I think he was insinuating for some of the Michelin shod teams.
How about Ralph Schumacher's luck that he has the big crash there in 2004 in the Williams, which keeps him out for a couple of races, and then 2005 he crashes in the same spot in the Toyota, and that's the catalyst for the Michelin tire failures, which get discovered, and then cancels the Michelin participation in the race.
Unlucky. There's not much you can say about it other than he's very, very unlucky to have that happen 2 years in a row.
Obviously, the race became a battle between Schumacher and Barrichello, and they nearly ran into each other at the first corner after one of the pit stops.
It was surprising. Like, you think sitting through that race, you go, "Oh, this has been an absolute bore." But obviously, with the interviews and things and everything going around, and you're right, Luke, Barrichello really giving Schumacher quite the hurry up as well. And I think he was quite unlucky, or he could have been much more forceful in that first corner to maybe even get the job done. But once he missed that opportunity, obviously Indianapolis being in Indianapolis, you can't get close enough to overtake.
He'd been upset with Schumacher earlier in the year at Monaco as well, when Schumacher had dive bombed him on the last lap at the chicane, and then this sort of added to it.
But do you think at that point in time where Ferrari were behind and trying to claw Schumacher's back as much as possible, that they were going to let anything else but Michael Schumacher win that race?
Oh, I don't think they let him win it. I think if Barrichello, they might have tried to advantage Schumacher a bit, but I think if Barrichello had done enough to stay ahead, they would have let him keep it.
So it wouldn't be like a Red Bull ring or A1 GP or A1 ring back when that scandal?
No, because Schumacher had no chance of the championship.
Yeah.
They were well out of it by then.
I was surprised though how early in the season the US Grand Prix was. I've been so used to it being the last couple of races, but this one was really just before the halfway point of the season. So I'd kind of just in the back of my head had it lined up as a race late in the season.
They slotted it in straight after Canada.
Yeah, it's like round 9 or something.
It was pretty close to the Indy 500.
And I, from memory, Brock, that was the diamond cutting that caused it when they relayed the circuit for the Indy 500. So
yeah, supposedly.
Diamond grinding, I believe, not cutting. Yeah.
One other thing about that is interesting is Michelin offered to refund all ticket holders and also pre-purchase 20,000 tickets for the following event at Indianapolis to give away.
Did they go through with it?
Well, I was hoping you'd know the answer to that. I have no idea.
That's pretty good of them trying to get on the front foot, understanding that, the result they obviously were trying to get behind closed doors. didn't eventuate. So what's the best thing that they can do? That's that's trying to do the whole PR spin to get themselves on the good foot, which is good to see. Like they could have easily just gone, oh well, we tried F1 politics. We can just come back next year. But understanding what they did, that's pretty good to see.
What is interesting is the fans went there and didn't see a race. Well, they did, but not a proper race.
No.
And everyone's like, oh well, obviously they need to be refunded, which is fair enough. And then Spa this year, they run 2 laps under safety car and call it a race. And where's I don't. It's actually not too different if you think about it.
No. Well, actually, they saw more of a race at
Indy.
at Indy.
Yeah. So. Bit of an odd one there.
And they got to throw all their beer cans on the track at Indy too.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. I think people started leaving pretty much straight after the race start, I think, as well.
Yeah, they were interviewing people in the car park and that. And
well, I think that was the thing too. They were just in the dark about it. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people in the crowd didn't know what was happening even after the cars just all pulled into the pits. And I think that's where obviously Formula One really, delved into stupidity, was when you were just keeping the fans in the dark.
Oh, but keeping fans in the dark is the picture perfect example of the Bernie era.
Well, even at the Liberty era, look at the 2020 Australian Grand Prix on the Friday.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true, actually.
But that was a tie-up between who was going to cancel it, though, and the contractual obligations around that.
It still wasn't putting the fans first.
Yeah, the fans were still lined up at the gate, and
especially given
Kimmy had gone home 12 hours earlier.
Yeah,
but especially given it was coronavirus that was the cause of the race, and they're leaving people huddled together at the gates.
Can we get some media passes, Liberty, please?
We'll tag them in it and see what they say.
We'll do a podcast in the paddock, I'm sure.
2021 Australian Grand Prix. We'll bring our face masks and
yep.
We'll try and get who from 2005's left. We can get Christian Horner in on it.
Yep, we'll get Christian.
David Coulthard will be walking around.
Mark Webber will probably be down there.
Jensen might be there for Sky.
Yeah.
Rubens might be in an S5000 if they bring him out.
Yeah, actually, we can have a 2005 reunion. I think Jack Villeneuve does some commentary these days, so he might be there.
Alonzo will be there.
Yeah.
Oh, and also hi to Ed Straw and Glenn Freeman, who are obviously listening to this podcast. Hi, guys.
Do you reckon Christian Albers will be in and around the paddock? Or?
No, he's above that, mate. He's above that.
Your mention of Glenn Freeman brings me onto this one. I was going to say, we mentioned earlier 2005 was the last year for Sauber, for Minardi, for Jordan, for BAR. But obviously it was also the last year for V10s and basically the last time we had fundamentally an unlimited engine formula with sort of free development, because for 2006 the V8s came in with rev limits and you could only develop them to a certain point, and they were sort of engine development was frozen and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's probably the saddest thing to come out of 2005.
Yeah, it was just the end of that time in the sport as well, with tobacco money, where it's just obscene amounts of money, like just horrendous amounts of money being spent. But something about it is pretty magical, and I think everyone looks back on it with a fond heart.
Well, I think you just got to listen to the engine note, and that just evokes good memories straight off the start. Like you guys know better than myself, since you've been to the Australian Grand Prix, and they've had the Minardi 2-seater down there, and compared to the current hybrid era, and that it's not as bad as it's made out on TV. But it just doesn't match the screaming V10s.
Bring back the V10s.
I think so.
Like I'd say it's a tough call. Everyone talks about like the Mazda 7.8, 7B, and whatever. Like for me, it's a hard choice. 2005 V10, Formula One car, or like a filthy old VT Ecotech with the muffler cut off. What do you
on,
reckon?
on 12 slotters.
Yeah, what do you reckon? On stockies, yeah, exactly.
Well, I think we just have to leave the opinion up to Lewis Hamilton. If you remember at Abu Dhabi last year when Alonzo was doing some fun laps, some demonstration laps in his 2005 Renault, and Lewis stopped an interview just to listen to the car go around. I do have to say though, if you spend a lot of time watching this year's Formula One, you forget how good they sounded.
I'm sad that that era is long gone, but I'm happy that we could relive it for a little while tonight in our podcast.
Me too. It was a really good season, and it's been good fun looking back on it. That's about where we'll leave it for this episode. Thanks to Daniel, Adam, and Brock for joining me. Thank you to Breakthrough Health and Wellness for their support, and make sure you go check out their Facebook and Instagram page, and go to my-breakthrough.com.au for more information. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.